I want to thank you guys all for joining us this morning. As you know, it's the first time the Evidence-Based Cybersecurity Research Group invites a speaker. We're very happy that David is our first speaker. We want to say thank you at this point to our dean who helped us sponsor this event, as well as for CETL for streamlining this talk. So this is all very exciting. Hopefully things went smoothly last night, and no embarrassment from our, from the hosts. We're learning. It's a learning experience for everybody, right? So hopefully we'll be able to do things better, next time. I'm very grateful for David for agreeing to be our first speaker. When Marie and I sat and thought about who should be invited to be the Evidence-Based Cybersecurity Group first speaker, David's name surfaced immediately because David is one of the pioneers of darknet research. He's one of the first criminologists who actually started this movement, right, of scraping the darknet. And given what we do, we thought it would be very relevant to our operation. Let me say a few words about David from his website. Professor Décary-Hétu has a degree in criminology from the University of Montreal. He worked as a senior scientist at the School of Criminal Science of the University de Lausanne before his current position as an assistant professor. Are you still an assistant?
Associate. I should change my website.
So you need to change it on your website. As an associate professor at the School of Criminology at the University of Montreal. Professor Décary research focuses on online illicit markets, and is now particularly interested in crypto markets and second generation online illicit markets. He has developed the data crypto tool that he uses to collect large amounts of information on crypto market participants. His research goals are to better understand the structure of markets and actors who participate in them, as well as to understand their performance in the context of online illicit markets. So please join me in welcoming David.
Thank you. I didn't know I did all that, so thank you for telling me. So thank you for being here. The goal of my presentation today is to talk about research that is still ongoing, that we started maybe 2 years ago. And our goal was to try and understand how do you become a hacker. And there's been a lot of research on hacking from a technical point of view, but very little from a social point of view. And the goal was really to understand who are the people behind these hacks, who are stealing all this data, stealing your credit cards, your information. And our goal was to go online and actually go above and beyond just collecting massive amounts of data, but actually looking, reading all the data, and analyzing it. And so for this project, the goal was to understand how do people are going to learn about hacking, how do they learn about the skills of hacking, and we're going to see today that it is maybe not from where we think that they're learning. So to begin this presentation, well, what is hacking, just so we all agree on the same thing? It's basically just breaking into other people's computers or networks with the intent to steal or destroy important data. Hacking can be used in many different contexts, but here what we really want to know is when people are trying to steal information and access computers when they shouldn't. Now, one of the very big questions that we have is, how difficult is it to be a hacker? A lot of people have, look at hackers, and there's this myth about what a hacker is, and it's supposed to be this really nerdy guy who lives in a basement, who has all these amazing technical skills, and kind of the popular knowledge is that hackers and hacking is something that's very technical and that's very, that you need a lot of skills for. I'm gonna keep talking while the video plays, hopefully, if I'm on the internet. And this is basically the story of Kevin Mitnick, one of the hack that he did. So Kevin Mitnick, I wasn't sure how old or young people are going to be in this room. So for those who don't know, Kevin Mitnick was actually the first most wanted hacker in the United States. And when he went to his trial, what the prosecutor said was that he was such a hacker that he could whistle into a phone and launch nuclear strike just by whistling into a phone, and he could control nuclear warheads just with his voice. And so there was this really big myth around him. This is what he looks like. And in this video, you guys can look it up online. It's really interesting. He talks about how he tried to hack this cell phone to try and monitor other people's conversations. And so he wanted to get the source code for the operating system for this phone, and he said, well, how am I going to do this? Well, I could hack into the computers from the phone makers and try and understand kind of how it's done. But what he decided was, well, maybe there's a better way of doing it. And so what he recounts in the video is him calling up actually a company that was making up the phone and just trying to get some excuse and talking to someone and telling them, I would like to talk with the project manager for the person for the project for this phone. And so he gets on the line with that person transfers him to someone else, who goes to someone else, and in the end he just talks to someone and he tells them, would you mind sending me the source code? I'm from your company. He tries to give them a few tips, and then the person says, well, I would really love to send you the source code, but apparently you're asking me to send this very confidential and private information outside of our network, and we're not allowed to do it. And so that's where he says, well, that's when I got really depressed. I was about to hang up. But the person said, well, actually, we created you an account on our own network, so just log in with this password, which is an admin password, and you can download anything you want from our network. And so he just passed himself as an employee, got the source code, and managed to hack the telephone. And so in this case, Kevin Mitnick was believed to be this incredible hacker, this person who could get into any network, but all he was using was social skills, calling people up to get all the information and the access that he wanted to. So in this case, do you really need to have any technical skills? In this case, not really. When we look at other hackers, what they're doing, what we see very often is that the hacking attempts or the hacking events that we see, they're really not all that technical. What we see very often, what's going to happen is, for example, people are going to be using default password, and so this elite hacker, what is he going to do? He's going to log in to a system. He's going to type it username admin, password admin, and then he's going to be in. Is that hacking? Is that an elite hacker? We can talk about this for a long time. People are going to be doing, password guessing, trying your birthdays, for example. They're going to be using more and more password stuffing. So basically, there's a whole dumps of passwords online, and what you can do is just download this list of email and passwords. And surprisingly, people apparently reuse the same passwords from multiple systems. So if I know one of your passwords, I probably know more of your passwords, and I can probably access many of your accounts. Finally, we even have, human error. That's something we see all the time. People are just, we've all seen people, copying and pasting passwords online, just, publishing their passwords online. We've seen people tweet their Twitter passwords very often. And so it's pretty humiliating. But, the hackers are going to be taking advantage of all of these. We're also going to see hackers, using these very basic techniques, but they're also very often going to be using other people's code. You may have heard, for example, of cryptojacking. It was a very big trend in 2018, 2019. It's basically a piece of software. In this case, it was hosted by CoinHive. And what this did is when you went to a website, it would actually just take over your CPU and start mining cryptocurrencies. So whenever you were on a website, you were actually, instead of seeing ads, the goal was for you to generate cryptocurrencies so the website owner could make money. But hackers realized that, if I take over a website and I put this software on and I put it on thousands of websites, well, I'm going to be making a lot of money. And so in this case, hackers, all they do is they reuse other people's code. And I'm sure from what I've heard, everyone here, or most people here are pretty technical. You've all, seen Metasploit, for example. So when you want to hack someone, it's pretty basic. It's really not that difficult. I guess everyone is able to type all these commands. You can look it up online. It's very easy. And, in a matter of seconds or minutes, you're going to be taking over a computer. So in many cases, hackers don't need really that many skills to be effective. They can hack into accounts, they can get into places very easily without knowing all that much. Of course, that's not the case for all hackers. There are some elite hackers. Here I just give a brief description of how you're supposed to hack into something when you know what you're doing. And so basically trying to find exploit, trying to find ways to get into a system. So you just, very often what people are going to be doing is fuzzing. So you just send whatever data you want to a piece of software until it crashes. And when it crashes, you try to figure out how, you reverse engineer it, and then you manage to get in. And the really good hackers are going to be making a lot of money illegally, but also legally. There's the Pwn to Own contest that was really interesting when it started because basically you could own whatever you hacked. So they would give you a MacBook. If you could hack into a computer, you would leave with that computer. So that was kind of a cool concept. And it's evolved over time. And as you can see over here, well, if you guys are interested, Tesla will pay you up to $900,000 if you're able to get into their system. So it's become it's become very profitable for hackers. So the goal of this kind of introduction is to say, there's a variety of hackers. Many of them are not going to be all that skilled. Many of them will know very little about hacking. All they know is that they can reuse password, they can use other people's code, and so you don't need to have like this advanced PhD, in cryptography to be a very good hacker. The fact remains, however, that, and the big guy over here, the sumo, is your defense, so your blue team in any company. Well, the defense is getting better and better at protecting the networks. It's still a very difficult job, but if you want to be a hacker, if you want to get into a system, you're still going to need to know a little bit about hacking and have some technical skills. And the goal of this presentation was to say, well, okay, so maybe we're not going to understand how you become this really super elite hacker, but we're going to look at kind of the mass of hackers and who don't have all that many skills, but who are still very interesting and important because they're the ones who are attacking the most systems. So one of my students is working on this question of how do you become competent, how do you acquire new skills, and so here you have her fabulous model, and there are many ways or many factors that are important when you're trying to learn a new skill, for example, the hacking skills. But in this case, what I wanted to look at was one piece only, which was social network. So trying to look at the network of these hackers and trying to see, can they foster learning, can they foster the development of skills for hackers. So it's not the whole picture, it's only a very small part of it, but I think it's a very important and very interesting part of this equation. Now, when you look at papers who have, studied, how do you become a hacker, there's very few of them. You're going to see some people saying, there's like what I call the lone wolf strategy. So, looking at textbooks, like computer security books, just online resources, looking at blogs, looking at source code, even going, on forums and just reading messages. So it is possible to learn by yourself. And if we go back to the model over here, you will need a lot of, intelligence and motivation. Many of my students, if they try to learn about hacking, and if I put them in a room for a month and told them become a hacker, they could have like everything they want. Sometimes you don't have the motivation. You're never going to get there. And so this is why having outside help is really important. This is why many hackers, many people who have learned about hacking are going to be using either online resources, and what we rarely consider but is very important is all the in-person private communications. For all the hackers that we've seen in Quebec, what we hear very often is that they're going to have friends from high school, from their neighborhood, who they were hacking with. So even though it's an online crime, it's very much rooted in the physical world and physical evidence, because these people are going to have in their social network people who know about hacking. But if you don't have that, or maybe the people you're with are not all that good, well, you're going to go online and try and find more people. And this is rooted in social learning theory, which we've all heard for a million times. And this is a funny slide about what you should or should not know and how important it is for you. But basically, what we're going to see is people learn from one another. This is one of the most effective ways of acquiring new skills, is when someone teaches you, because reading about something, you can learn something. Seeing a video on YouTube about something, even better, but talking with someone is where you're going to be the best, most efficient. This is where you're going to learn the most about something. We've also seen mentors, so mentorship is very important. This is my mentor, Carlo Marcelli, and Carlo hates doing photos, and for this time he was forced to do a photo shoot, and so you can see he has his natural smiley face, because he's like, you want me to stand behind a fence and smile? No way. So mentorship is really important, because these are one-on-one relations where you're going to have very intense and frequent meetings with someone, and this is where you get the most transfer, the most knowledge transferred, is when you're really into this deep personal relationship with someone else. And people have looked at forums to try and understand, okay, well, if social learning is something, if mentorship is something, then maybe, or how good are forums to help us acquire new skills and become more efficient. And forums have been described as online learning communities, It's basically a place where people who have a common interest will meet and exchange and talk with each other. It's been said that it's a very profitable or very good place to learn because it's open 24 hours a day. You have a lot of peers, so you have a big pool of peers you can draw from and talk with. And you're going to see evolve on these forums many types of relationships. So you're going to see actually people who are going to be teachers teaching other people. So you're going to have this teacher-learner relationship. But you're also going to have a lot of learner-to-learner relationship as well. So people who may not be experts or teachers, but who try to co-create knowledge together to build something together. So it's not always this relationship between the mentors. Maybe it's two people trying to figure something out. And community-centered learning environments, it's pretty much what I just said. So forums are going to foster critical thinking. They're going to foster people to dig deeper into subjects, to think more about subjects. And the efficiency for learning in forums will depend on how much of a tight-knit community it is. So if it's a very big forums where people don't know each other, or if they're in a very small subforum where everyone knows each other, it's going to have very different impact. And there are many cases, many examples, of studies. Here I have an example for fraud. It's really interesting where you're going to have, I'm not going to make you guys read all of this, but it's Astro PID, which used to be Magic PID, which is a forum that taught people how to do social engineering fraud. So in this case, what they're teaching the people is how do you get a free chair? So these are very nice chairs you have over here. I'd love to have some in my office. And so how do I get one? Well, basically they tell you, you just fill up, you send an email saying you have this chair, it's kind of broken, you don't really like it, and then you call the department, and then I obscured the phone, but they actually put in the real phone number for the company, and they tell you, call that person, and then you're gonna see the person's name is like Chandra, the consumer relations manager, Chandra, talk to her, tell her this, and you're gonna get a new chair for free. And then you have people working through this together. So they're going to say, I never got this to work when I tried. Did they change people policies since? When did you get your chair? I need a new chair. And so people are going to be building together kind of their knowledge, and then people are going to tell them, well, could you be more specific? What could we do? You have to try this. Remember, this is a very small company. So if there's 400 people who call this person and says that we have a broken chair, we need a new one for free, maybe she's going to get suspicious, and maybe you should use this method, but with another company. And so what you see in this case is not, really expert, but it's people building knowledge about how you're supposed to be doing fraud. Now on forums, a lot of people have also raised the fact that there's a lot of trolls, so I'm not teaching you anything new. A lot of people on forums are going to be just trolling, so insulting people, creating conflicts. So these are not kind of magical gardens where everyone is happy, everyone is sharing their knowledge. Very often there will be a lot of conflicts in forums, and people will just yell, insult each other. And this really disrupts or prevents people from acquiring new skills. And so the goal of this presentation is to kind of try and evaluate how forums could help us to understand or develop new skills. And many people, what they've looked at is just forums, trying to see, do people post a lot, do they come often, and kind of not looking at the content of the message, but just are there a lot of people, are they posting a lot of messages, and try to infer from this if people are acquiring new skills. Now, our goal was to go a bit further than this, and so our goal was to look at a forum, but actually go in. And in this case, what I use is the Hack Forums forum. It's very well known in the community. Why? Because they have millions and millions of members. But it's also kind of laughed at very often because it's the website where people, kind of the noobs, like the people who don't have many skills, that's where they go, because when you type in Google hacking forum, what is the #1 result you get? Well, it's Hack Forums, of course. And they actually have a section which is called Beginner Hacking. And my goal was to look into this beginner hacking sub-forum to see, well, if I wanted to become a hacker, what would I do? I would go on Google, I would type in, hacking forum, and there's a nice section called beginner hacking. It's like, perfect for me to kind of test some theories and see where we can learn from this. And so what we did, we went on this forum and tried to see, are there support networks? Are there conflict networks? So are people supporting each other? Are people helping each other into this beginners hacking section? And are people actually just insulting each other? And what is the relationship between the two? And how important is one versus the other? So I had a bunch of research assistants who had a great time. They went through, if I look at my note, they went through 40,000 messages that they read one by one, and their goal was to see, is someone asking a question, trying to learn something, and is someone else helping them or insulting them? And so in the end, we got about 16,000 support ties from these messages, and about 4,000 conflict ties, so people just insulting or creating conflicts with each other. And we had about 6,600 participants from these 40,000 messages. So we collected all the messages. Here you have just the distribution over time, the number of participants for every single day. You see there's not that many people. There are 40,000 messages over a year, so we did a whole year for this research. But on any given day, you're going to have about 60, on average, people who are going to be interacting. And once again, we only looked at when people were helping or creating conflict. So there's a lot more messages, a lot more people involved, but we really zoned into just the people who were there to either help others acquire new knowledge or actually prevent others from acquiring new knowledge. An important point to see, well, just to give you some background, do people stick around? If you're going to be learning something, if you want to acquire new skills, you're going to have to be around, for a while. You're going to be around talking with people. And here you have the percentage of people who, and the time that they stay on. So if we saw someone on day one, for example, well, about 45% of people were still there a week later. About 25% of people were there, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days later. So you have a lot of churn, so people who do go there, about half of them, we don't see them a week after or later. We have about 25% of people who actually just stay there longer, but there is a big churn. So whatever I'm going to say after this, you have to remember that people do go on this forum, they do ask questions, they do get involved into the network, but in many cases, these people are not going to be there for a year. They're not going to be there for 90 days. We don't see them, for example, 75% of the people, when we see them, we don't see them 90 days later or later. When you look at the distribution across the network, you have a little bit over half, so 58% of the people who went on the forum were there only involved in support ties. So these are kind of the good guys. They're there to help others or to receive help from others, either way. But they're only involved in something that is positive, in skill-building conversations. You're going to have 36% of the people who are going to be involved in conflict and support networks. So that's kind of interesting to see that about a third of the people, yes, they're there to learn, but while they're there, they either get trolled, get insulted, get in conflicts with others. And you have 6% of people, they're just bad actors. They have nothing better to do than to go on this beginner hacking forum to yell at people and tell them how bad they are at hacking. So it's pretty lame for a life, but for some people that's what they do. And so as I said, what we did is we looked at social network analysis of the support and conflict networks. So we took all the messages, we put them together, we created two networks. One of them is for support ties, so people who are helping out each other. And the other one is for conflict, when people were telling others, to piss off or to do anything that is not constructive. And when someone was asking a question, they were telling them, that's a stupid question. You should get out. Why are you even alive? Just leave us alone. So they were very kind of mean things that people were saying to each other. And the two things that we tried to do is for each network, look at the centralization of the in and the out degree. So basically look at the distribution of ties among this network and see, is one person asking a lot of questions, and is one person answering these questions, and is there kind of a concentration of all the ties? And in the case of conflict, for example, is everyone piling on the same person? So if you have a very high centralization of the ties, what you're going to see is in the conflict network, either everyone is yelling at the same person, or everyone is yelling at everyone, or no one is yelling at all. So this is what you're going to get to see in a few seconds. And the other thing was to look at how correlated are your activities in the support and conflict networks. So basically, are people involved in both, and how correlated are the two? So this is where I show you my amazing design skills. I did this by hand. So this is the support network, and the color and the size of the nodes are based on the in degree. And so the darker and the bigger the node is, the most help this person received. And so in this case, what you see is that there are a lot of actors, And there are some people who really want to learn something, so they're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to get a lot of support from the community. You see them in the middle over here. But you also see an important number of people who basically have very small nodes. So basically, they're only asking 1 or 2 questions, or they're only answering one, or they're only getting answer to 1 or 2 of their questions. Doesn't mean that they could ask 1,000 questions, but if they only receive help once, that means they're only going to have 1 tie, and they're going to be a pretty small node over here. So if we look at the distribution of the in degree of support ties, you see that basically this is kind of a different way of presenting the same data. Most people actually receive very little help. On average, people received support ties 2.4 times. So on average, the people who went on the forum, they got 2 people to help them to answer their questions. And the maximum was 102, and the median was 1. So basically, half of the people only get 1 support throughout their lifetime during the year on the forum. Here what you have is the support network, and it's maybe even more interesting, is looking at the out degree, so basically people who are helping out others. And what you see here is that, well, basically no one is helping out others, or they're helping others very little. You have very little dark nodes and big nodes, and you have a very limited number of actors who are going to be answering everyone, helping out everyone, but it's a very concentrated pool. And so here you have, once again, the distribution. And the average is the same, so about 2. So people on average will answer 2 people. But in this case, the biggest node had 520 ties, which means that there was someone like this super actor who was training others, giving out a lot of help to others, well above and beyond what other people were doing. This is the conflict network, very different, as you can see. And so this is the in degree, which means that the bigger the node you are, the more conflict you're receiving. And you can already see that there's actually a lot fewer actors in this network, and that it's much more distributed. So there's not only a single person who gets yelled at or gets in conflict, but you can see that it's pretty distributed, and you see that there's actually actors who are going to be very targeted by the other hackers. There's some actors who receive a lot of the heat from this forum. And here you have the distribution, and this is the out degree, so how important are people just creating conflict for others. And you see that there's a few actors who are creating a lot of conflicts, just insulting, telling other people to go away. And most people who are involved in conflicts is going to be a very low intensity, but you do have these big actors who are involved in conflicts. And then, well, the distribution. And then what becomes really interesting is to see, well, how are these networks correlated with each other? And here you just have a simple correlation between the in degree, the out degree, and the degree. Degree is when you add up in degree and out degree together. That's what you get. And what you see over here is that there are actually some pretty strong relationships. And basically, when you do get help, so for example, when you receive support in degree over here, you see it's positively correlated with pretty much all of the other metrics, and you see that the more help you receive, well, the most conflicts you receive as well. So it's kind of a dangerous kind of setting where you're more involved. Even if you try to learn more, you're probably going to be hurt more, insulted more, or be in more conflict. And even when you're helping others, which is really interesting, what you see, it's the biggest correlation over here. You see that people who are helping others are also the people who are creating conflicts with others. And so what we saw was that we had some key players who were really involved in the community who would be creating a lot of the support ties, helping out a lot of the other people. And what they were also doing was actually creating conflict at the same time. And so that was kind of interesting. We were talking about sports before I started the presentation. One person I was talking about this with said, it's kind of like when you have your coach in a hockey team or baseball team or whatever, your coach is going to be giving you tricks on how to become better, but they're also going to be insulting you all the time, like you could be better, you have to work harder. So we kind of have this dual process, dual roles for these key people. And you see that usually it's correlated, but it's very weak. So when you're receiving help for others, you're not going to be helping out others all that much. But so the people who are creating the most conflicts are going to be the ones who are also creating the most knowledge and helping out the most the others. So where does that take us? Well, a few kind of interesting things. first of all, we didn't look at the quality of the knowledge that was being shared online. So we didn't look like, are these people becoming real hackers? Few people have tried to do that. It's very difficult because you don't know where the people learn their skills. So even if people get more sophisticated in the messages that they post, it's very difficult to know where they learned the new skills. What we were really interested in was not saying the quality of the learning, but actually was their learning being there? Were people helping others kind of developing new skills? And the one thing that was really surprising to me is how little of it happened, actually. So the networks were kind of small. People did not stick around for a very long time, and they were not asking a lot of questions. So the network and the ties was actually smaller than what I expected. And overall, when you look at this, yes, a few people received a lot of support, but for most people, it was very limited. And it's not like a place where you can go, where you can ask all your questions, get all the answers that you want. And so when we look at forums as places where you can develop your new skills, what we show is that, yes, there is a support network. Yes, people are learning new skills, but is it sufficient? Like, could you become an elite hacker just by going to this beginner hacker section and learning about stuff? Maybe you could, but probably not, or very few people actually do just go to this forum. The second thing that was really interesting was the ratio of support versus conflict ties. So we had about a 4-to-1 ratio between the support and the conflict ties. And this was really interesting. So that meant that, even though there is conflict and the conflict is going to hinder or limit what you're going to learn, there is actually a lot more support than conflict in this network. And I forgot to add the slide this morning, but what we saw was that when people were involved, I did some further analysis looking at the kind of evolution over time of conflict and support ties. And what we saw was that very few people, their last interaction on the forum is going to be a conflict. So when you look at all the people who have support and conflict ties, very often, actually in about 80% of the cases, their last interaction was positive. It was a support tie. So we didn't find, I haven't done all the analysis I want with this, but looking at the analysis to see, well, are you going to be in a conflict and leave the forum because you're going to yelled at and insulted? That doesn't seem to be happening all that often. So there is more support than conflict, which is kind of, which is very interesting and which fosters, learning for this community. We couldn't find really kind of, looking at social learning theory. So, you need to have frequent, intense contacts with other people. That's not something that we really saw on the forum. It did happen with people who were really involved, but the people who were mostly involved were actually answering other people's questions. Very few people were there receiving a lot of advice. And what we were expecting was to see some mentorship relationships, so to see maybe two people interacting very heavily, but what we didn't really see any mentors in this scenario. So you do have people who have mentorship role, but with the community rather with individuals, which is usually what you see when you want to develop new skills and become a better hacker. You're going to need to be working with someone very closely that is going to help you better understand hacking and how it's done. And kind of a really interesting thing is when I was talking with my research assistants, I was trying to get more descriptive, and that's something that we also want to work on. So kind of describe what kind of support ties there is and what kind of conflict ties there is. And it was really interesting that many of the conflicts that were arising in this community was because people were asking questions that were kind of outside or that went against the values of the community. So for example, people were saying, my girlfriend just dumped me. I want to get into her Gmail email. How do I do this? And then people would just pile on to that person saying, you shouldn't hack. You should leave her alone. She probably left you for someone better. And so there was a lot of conflicts, but it was really interesting because many of these conflicts were not people just being just mean to other people. It was actually, you're asking for something that we don't approve of, and we're enforcing we are hackers, yes, but we also have rules. And so that was really interesting. One of the most interesting one that came around very often, and guys, you should know about this, people were asking, can you help me hack into my school's computer to change my grades? And surprisingly, I thought the hackers would go for it, but no, they were against it. So this is not in that forum that you're going to learn how to get an A+ in your classes. Apparently, it's not a hacker-approved kind of question. And so there were very few kind of key players that were tasked, but with regulating the community. And this is what I thought was really interesting, was that there's a lot of learning in this community, and the conflict that is there is not necessarily bad for the community, and that's why it's surviving for so long, I think. It's because when there is conflict, there is reason for this conflict, and it's not just people being mean with each other for no reason. There's actually a reason for these conflicts. So moving forward, what we want to do is, try and explain the presence of support and conflict ties. So that's what I was just talking about a few seconds ago, about why are people supporting each other. We want to go above and beyond what has been done in the past. So I've been collecting data, as David said, on the darknet since 2013. I was maybe it's my claim to fame. I was the last one to scrape the Silk Road, which was the first big market on the dark web. And that made just me very valuable, because I had this data set that was like the last one that was made available to researchers. And very often, like my technique when I was undergrad and even at graduate schools, I thought that I could just, scrape all this information, put it in a machine, put it in SPSS, press on the number, and I'm going to get like a number like 42. And I'm like, okay, so I got the answer. Very easy. Maybe I'm just a lazy person in general. But more and more as I do research with these forums, I'm learning that scraping and collecting all this data, yes, is very important. But then we need the help of an army of research assistants to actually read the messages and give them meaning. And so that's something that I've been trying to do with this project, where we go above and beyond. And I don't think you could automate or have an AI do what we just did. And a lot of my research and ongoing research is actually just interacting with hackers, talking with them, and kind of doing what criminology is supposed to be about, going out in the field and talking with people. Sometimes we forget that's also part of the job. And Andréane, who will be presenting herself in a minute, will be talking about another research project that we have that is exactly about this, going out there, interacting with people. And so to explain the presence of support and conflict ties is go out and talk with these hackers and say, why do you spend 2 hours a day helping out random people on the internet? What is your motivation? Are you learning something? What are you receiving from this? Is it just because you think it's for karma or whatever? So talking with these hackers and trying to better understand what they're doing. Another thing also is we only looked at the public messages, and there's been like 1 or 2 research that's been looking at this, kind of the differences between what you say openly and what you say privately. We all know that if I look at the people you talk openly on Facebook versus the people you message on Messenger, we're going to have 2 very different social networks to analyze. And so in this case, trying to compare dumb forms, so forms that have been hacked, for which we have the private messages, trying to see what are the differences in the patterns, so we can apply this to forms that have not been hacked, and where we can extrapolate and make assumptions for those forms as well. And as I said, and kind of the last thing, if you guys know any hackers, we're always interested in trying to reach more hackers, to interview them, to see how do you become a hacker, how do you develop your skills, how do you become more proficient at what you want to do. So, and this was just a hacker. This is a keyboard for hackers. That's all you need, 0 and 1. So that's it for my presentation. We had actually 2, so you have 2 for 1 today. Andréane, I wanted also to present to you guys one of our research projects, but I'll let her introduce it and tell you all about it. Thank you. Well, after, maybe?
Ah non. Oh, j'ai pas le bon. J'ai pas le bon adapteur. Non, je peux pas.
T'es VGA ou t'es...
Non, c'est parce que c'est pour mon téléphone.
Ton sac?
Il est à l'hôtel.
Peux-tu me l'envoyer? OK.
Sorry.
So, we'll just... 1 second. Technical difficulty.
Comment je fais pour...
I don't know if anyone has a question while we're getting set up.
Yeah, I got a question. I think you kind of answered this a little bit with the last interaction in these forums. But I was thinking in terms of like, did their longevity in the forum relate to whether they were tied more into the support or conflict?
Yeah.
reports?
So the longer you're there, the more involved you're going to be. But what we've also seen is people move across forums very fluidly. They maybe start, with hack forums and then we move on to somewhere else. Hack forums is really interested because yes, all the noobs and all the new people go there, but it's also where most elite hackers are. I don't know if you read Brian Krebs' blog. He's a very well-respected researcher in the field of cybercrime. And it's really interesting because he does all this research on really like these Russian elite hackers. And these guys are on these very obscure forums, but they're also on hack forums. It's kind of like the place where everyone is, where everyone advertises, where everyone talks, just because there's millions of people, so everyone is going to be there. But one really interesting thing that we could do is to take on hack forums, but multiple forums, get all the data together and look at the profiles of people if they're using the same username, and say, okay, so he learned this little piece of information here, but he also learned about something else somewhere else, and so we could just map this whole network into kind of the whole network of hackers online, and not just from one forum, which is a big limit from this study. And good to go. So maybe after for the question, if you don't mind.
I'm not sure what's going on with the screen.
Oh, it's going to show up. It's just Still trying to learn to teach you some French at the same time. I don't think you guys are taking notes.
Do you speak French?
Very? Yeah. So, okay. So this is our kind of a cool pet project we've been working on for the past few months. Thanks to some grants and pounds. Oh, it has grants and pounds. So you get double the money for the same amount.
Okay, so my name is Andrian. I work with David on this project, which is very exciting, so I'll present to you today. So the name of the project will be drugroot.com. But our project is part of a bigger project which aim to study how online technologies influence all the transnational organized crime and illicit market and everything. So today I will just show you principally our methodologies and freshly analyzed data that very preliminaries, if I can say. I analyzed them this morning, so you're really lucky. But the bigger project is at a lot of axes. We are looking at malware propagation, transnational drug trafficking, which is our axis, of course, modern slavery for sexual exploitation, and money laundering. We are in partnership with a lot of researchers, so researchers from Cardiff University. Maybe you surely know Michael Levy, Pete Bernap, Luca Giomoni, Matthew Williams. There's also University of Surrey with Julia Berlusconi, sorry Julia, and University of Montreal, Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention, and Trans Crime in Italy. So all those researchers working together on this. But our project is on axis 2, and our mission is to analyze whether dark web markets are changing the configuration of international drug trafficking flows. And we will do this by using recent advances in statistical model for social network analysis. So this is the objective we have, but it's not the result that I'm presenting today, right? Remember. So a bit of background quickly. So there was a lot of, how can we say, sorry, I'm looking for my words. So the reported stark increase in the use of online platform used by the transnational organized crime. So they are using more and more the internet, which will not surprise anyone here. And then the government has to react, of course, to those new use of technologies. So we are becoming increasingly responsibilized, if I can say, to collaborate more with in private and public and private sector, just so we can adapt to this technology that is evolving really, really fast, right? So what we want to do, so our task is to better understand the flows of illicit drug facilitated by the darknet and to compare those flows with the data that we have now. What do we have now? We have the data that all the countries report to the United Nations. So this is basically police numbers, right? So as useful as they can be.
If I can,
Yeah.
because it's all self-reported, the data that we have, well, China says that there's no drug use in their country. So when you look at the official statistics, no drugs in China. So this is why this is super important, is because we go above and beyond what countries want us to believe.
Exactly. So this is, we want to know about the dark figure of crime. And this is how we thought we could do. So we thought that we will reach directly those people who is exchanging money for drugs and drug for money online. So we built a website, and it's basically a questionnaire that people can go into and respond to some questions. Those are the questions. So the type of drug they buy or they sell, the quantity, the country where the drug is shipped from, the country where the drug is shipped to, was the drug or payment was received by the person. So, and this is the first time that we will have this information, which is very valuable. So, did you receive your drug or not? This is the first time we have this. So. And our website is accessible, of course, on the dark web and on the clear web as well. So it's more convenient for everybody. This is what it looks like right now. So you fill in the information, and we have a map. Okay, so we gather all those information, and then we project it on a map. So the darkest green will be a very good country to order from. Some drug. China's there, yeah. And the red one is like unsuccessful drug routes, since people probably have not received their drug from there. And when it's white, it's you received it, but there were some issues with it. It was not as expected. So that's it. So then, but how do we get, that's cool, we have the website, okay, that was a good idea, but then how can we get people to come and enter their information, right? So we figured that we need a really, really good marketing plan. So this is what we are doing now. The website is on for about 2 weeks now, okay? So it's really, really new, but we already have data. So the marketing plan was first to contact the dark website administrator, okay? Because the second part is contacting the user. But if we don't want to be kicked out for spamming the users, we have to contact the administrator first. And at the same time, we were asking first for their insight about the project and how they could help us. And so we make them involved in this project, so they like it, I think. They appreciate that we ask for their opinion. And then we contact the users. So we go talk with the vendors, with the buyers. We go on forums to post some advertisement of our site. And then we contact also the influential community of the dark web. So we got this article on Darknet Live, and since the article was published, it's like underground news online. And since we got this article published, our participation rate increased a lot, so it was very beneficial. And then we ensure a presence on social media too, since the community is fairly small. It's as big as it is small, because we can reach them very efficiently, we'll see. If you want to follow us, it's at @JudRoots on Twitter. So please help us share the words. So the result, quick descriptive results. So it's mostly cannabis and cocaine that is exchanged for the data that we got now. So we only have 2 weeks of data, which was 142 entries, so which is good. We are happy about this. So the transactions were made from January 1st because you can enter the date you made the transaction. So the oldest one that we have is January 1st to now, because I get those this morning. And there was, like, the worth of the transaction this morning was $243,000 US. Sorry, I'm doing the conversion in my. So, and as you can see, there was like 97% of buyers that enter the information rather than sellers. But this makes sense since like the vendor sell more drug than the buyer can buy for themselves, right? So it's more not complicated, but it's longer for them to just enter all those all their informations. But we have the bulk submission option on our website, but maybe like people don't know about it yet. When we do the pitch to sell our website, we don't have, like, it has to be catchy and short, so we don't give all those information, but maybe this will be part of my future marketing plan. So yes, and then what about the origin of the buyer? So you can see that you guys are in first position. 25% of the buyer come from here. After that, it's Great Britain, Germany, Canada, France, and Australia. The 33% remaining are divided between the other countries, but those were the main one. The origin of the drug, again, United States in first. There are less player for the origin of the drug because there's only 17% remaining that is divided with all the other countries. So this is the biggest actor, we'll say. So was it successful or not? Sorry, so 86% of the drug were received, of the drug or of the payment, right? And 11% was not received, 3% had issue, so it was not as expected. And here I put the route that was not received. So from Australia to Afghanistan, not received. Brazil to Brazil, Louisiana to Canada. So there's that's interesting because it's sorry, it's as like it's the same even if it's within the country or outside the country. In both cases, you might be exposed to not receiving your drug, but still, this is what I want. So yes, the cyber dimension of transnational organized crime will continue to permanently evolve, and this is the way that we found to adapt to it and try to get those information. So we want to know about the dark figure of crime. We want to make like the successful and unsuccessful routes, just to learn more about this, and ultimately making a network analysis about all this. So, yes, you'll take question, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
I can go again. David, and this is kind of for both of you, but I think you probably pioneered the method of using the form or the feedbacks to kind of get a sense of market size transactions.
Yep.
Is there a question on here for whether they left feedback? Because then you could use that, the percentage of these people who are responding, yes or no, I left the feedback, to really get at, market size and volumes and so forth.
There's a million things we want to ask. The problem is always the more questions you ask, the fewer people answer. We know that it's gone down a lot, just talking to law enforcement. Now it's only about 50% of people who leave feedback. And I was sharing there was a master's that was published that had access to a seized darknet market, and they compared what was really happening to what we scraped online. And for some sections of that paper from the thesis, it was really hard to read just because they were saying like, you're doing the best you can, but with public data, your analysis is going to be pretty bad. So for estimating revenues, for example, the feedbacks now, they're pretty bad. And no, they were even making us think about stuff, just when are you collecting the data? So if you scrape a website on a Monday, the data you're gonna get is different from a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday. And most listings or most feedbacks or most data is gonna be on Tuesday, because that's when people buy for the weekend. And so they were showing, for example, that we scraped on a Sunday and we showed that there was a dip, in the numbers in the market, but it wasn't because there was a real dip, it was just because we scraped on a Sunday instead of a Monday. And so all these questions, I mean, that's why I think it's really important to have, this data set. We will evolve this, but our goal right now is to get a lot of traction. It's really difficult to convince people to come to the website. And I don't know if you looked how many spam reports we had, but I mean, it has to be, what is the share of the spam reports you would say?
I don't know, 15%?
No, about 1 in 5 is spam, and it's very difficult, to know, someone says they bought, a gram of cocaine for $80 from the States, probably legitimate, but if that person says, I bought a gram for $175, is that just that person sucks at buying drugs? Is it just expensive drugs? We just kind of don't know. So there's kind of benefits right now. We're kind of letting it a bit looser just to get some traction. And then we can add, very long answer to we'll get there sometime. Yeah.
So the frame for this question is increasing use of pen testing by companies legitimately to test their systems. In the first study, do you have any sense anecdotally for how much of your data was professional in the sense of new pen testers trying to learn
But I doubt that's where they would go. My sense is, and from what we read, it really wasn't professionals who were asking questions. There are, other forums, other websites. The goal of hack forums is really to let you kind of experiment more and to ask questions like, can I get my girlfriend's, email addresses? But it's very difficult to distinguish between professional security professionals and hackers. And one of the problem and the issue I have with many studies is they go see security professionals, they call them hackers, and then they study, legitimate people when they should be studying, hackers. But in our case, I'm pretty confident that it was, mostly young, new people. This is beginner hacker on hack forums. It's just the people who are asking the help of others, they're going to be mostly new people into the hacking, so probably teenagers or young adults trying to figure out how this works.
So maybe not even hackers.
No, so the goal for these people, they want to become, so even me calling them hackers, that would be something I would have to think about, because they more want to be hackers than real hackers.
Yeah.
Very good point. Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand a little bit better. You used only the newbie forum,
Yeah.
right, for this? And when individuals interact on the forum, when someone posts a question, on average 2 people respond. Is that correct? Right, that was kind of the most common.
So most people get 2 answers, so yeah,
They get
on
2
average.
answers.
Yeah.
But usually when someone posts a question, there's like a series of responses from multiple people. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that the kind of learning that's going on here is more discrete, episodic in terms of, I mean, I'm on some other forums myself, and I only go on there when I have a specific problem that I need a specific answer to. I'm not looking for a mentoring relationship from somebody.
Yeah.
And so I think it seems a little difficult to say that what's going on here is mentoring unless you can demonstrate that some individuals are continuously interacting with the same people over time.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I said there was mentorship, like actually there was not, and it's a bit different also because when we were talking about hacking, you're trying to develop a new skill set. So there's a lot of things you need to learn. If I'm, I don't know, working on a car, for example, I have a specific question about cars. It's going to be kind of a different thing. Whereas I'm new into cars, I may be more in the forum trying to understand, okay, so how do cars work? How do motors operate? And everything. So when you're beginning and building up your skill set, you should be on forums more just to read more messages, to ask more questions. But once you're more established, then you're going to be in there asking one question once, and you'll be back 6 months later.
Because then what happens with the forum is that there are these other more advanced forums with more specific kinds of
Exactly,
areas,
yeah.
right? So the assuming would happen is that people would graduate from the basic form and move into these other ones.
Yeah.
You'd also expect the relationship between answer givers and answer or questioners to be different as well. So you'd get probably.
Yeah, but
Remember, in the basic form, there's a lot of sort of, they don't understand the social comportment of the you know, the form itself. So
Yeah.
that's why they think, I'm gonna ask a question about changing my grades and then I'm gonna get shut down. That kind of question doesn't show up in the more advanced parts of the form, obviously, right?
yeah,
So
and
the network should look different as you move into these other more specified.
oh, exactly. I mean, it'd be really interesting to go and see these other subforums. And what we, you know, even when the threads, that's why we needed to read them manually, is, you know, sometimes someone would get 3, 4 answers, and sometimes, you know, people would say, I have, you know, the same question. So even in a single thread, we could have multiple ties going all the way, all over the place, and even people insulting and helping others in the same thread.
So the only thing, other thing I would say is that we're thinking about this in terms of the kinds of people that go onto the forum looking for information, but if you're an really super advanced hacker, I doubt you would spend very much time on the basic forum just sort of giving basic information out of the goodness of your own heart. So the type of people giving answers on the basic forum is also different, right? So
Oh yeah, oh totally, yes.
So you get different patterns of relationship.
And it's very time consuming, so it took us months to analyze these 40,000 messages and build the network, and we collected extra data at the same time. But yeah, moving forward, we'll try and, you know.
So I have several questions. We can talk about, you know, the long list of questions I have when we take you to lunch.
Yeah.
And you joining us for that, right? But you know, I know that you've been doing this work on the darknet for the last 10 years or so. What's the rationale behind going to this wannabe hackers forum and analyzing their messages versus, you know, you sat on many advanced hacker forums in the past, right? I mean, you published on that as well. Well, why not using the information from, you know, those hacker forums in order to study everything that, you know, you just presented to us?
It was a very like Scott Jakes move, looking at the low intensity offenders, looking at, you know, boring offenders, if you will. But I mean, going to this forum, it's just like Facebook. Why do people go to Facebook? It's because everyone is on Facebook. I mean, social networks, they picked up because everyone was there. I mean, like the first, you know, Friendster, the first social network, you joined and then you had no friends, so you just left, and then the network died. But the hack forums, why do people go? It's because everyone is there. I mean, when you have millions of people there, no matter if you're going to be interacting with these people on elite, you know, deep web or dark web forums, there's also going to be there at the same time, because if you want to sell something, if you want to learn something, this is the biggest wealth of information is going to be there. And that's, if you're looking for something, you're probably going to find it there, rather than go on 5 different forums and trying to find like the one thing you're looking for. So that's why everyone is there, because you're going to find what you want. And if I'm selling something, I would rather sell to as many people as possible. And that's why in most of my talks, when I talk about, you know, online drug dealing, people make a big case of like crypto markets, and the police often ask me, but if you're going to be serious about online drug dealing, where should you go? Facebook. Just because that's where people advertise for drugs, and you're going to have so many more dealers on Facebook than on the dark web. Why? Because everyone's on Facebook, and that's where people buy drugs. So you always have to remember, like, the dark web is really cool. I shouldn't say this in video, but there's a lot more stuff happening on, you know, on Facebook.
Or Telegram, right?
Or Telegram, yeah.
So my other question is, and that's kind of going in lines with what you just, you know, and the way you answer the question right now. Can you talk a little bit about how you perceive cybercrime research? I mean, is there a science into that? I mean, and if there is a science into it, you know, how do you bring it in your work?
Yeah, but I think so that, as I said earlier, I think we really need to talk more with online offenders. They are really open. I mean, I'm amazed at how interested they are in the research. Like on the website on drug routes, you know, I have papers that I put there, and people will send in their comments on the papers, and they're not PhDs, but they're just, you know, really interested, and they're gonna say, like, you know, you got this, and this right, but this is just stupid. What are you saying? And so they're really engaged with research. They're really interested in research, and I think that we need to engage the community more and more. And for some stuff, we need to scrape massive amounts of data, and that's really powerful and interesting. And it will allow us to answer some questions. but I've seen very few. If you look at the journal Criminology, how many cybercrime pieces were published in that? I mean, practically none. All the big journals, they don't publish a lot of cybercrime, and the feedback that I usually get is, well, it's too niche. Who is going to be interested by what you're saying? And that's often kind of the comment I have is like, interesting piece, lots of problems with it, as always, but it's always the main problem is, well, even if you did all of this, who are you going to be talking to? And so I think for us, I mean, I'm always surprised when I look at our own school in Montreal, the number of students who are interested in cybercrime, very, very, very few. I mean, with the distribution, people are interested by victims, they're going to be interested by all the native problems that we have. But cybercrime, it's very difficult to get people interested in, even though you have like this amazing lab, with raising desks and big screens and everything, and all the data that they want in the world. It's still difficult to engage and interest people in cybercrime. And well, we're lucky to have some good students with us, but it's still difficult to convince them that cybercrime is the future. And when I started, I thought it would be super easy. I was like, 5 years from now, everyone's going to be on cybercrime, and the evidence just shows that, no, that's not the case.
I have another question. How you code up, whether it's conflict or support, is obviously critical to the network's results, right? I can imagine somebody pipes in, whether, you get these hierarchical responses, somebody says, hey, jackass, that's not how you do it. And then they go and they give a positive feedback to the original post. So how do you code up that kind of scenario? And also, you said you had a cadre of research assistants. Did you look at reliability between?
So it's just so I don't have all the details here, but it was, I would say that their accuracy score over 95%. The interjudge, so it was pretty easy to code. Like when people said, for example, like that's a stupid way of doing it. You should be doing it this way. We also had conflict between other people. So you answer my question, and then David says that's a very stupid way of doing it. Then you have conflict between the two of you, and then he's helping me out. So that's how we played it, but it wasn't too difficult to. The hardest part of it was training more the technical speak. So people trying to understand, okay, so what he's talking about, exploit kit, what is that? And trying to understand the slang. I would say that was the hardest part of the project. But once people kind of understood what people were talking about, it was relatively easy. And it's short messages, it's not like, pages and pages. So it's kind of easy to analyze because it's short and concise.
I think you're trying to get at a little bit more what the motivation behind the conflict is to begin with. So it's not just about content coding the response. It's about what is the response in response to, so to speak, right? So if someone says that's a stupid way to do it, you would code that as an insult. But if it's instructive, that's very different from I'm saying this to you because I don't agree with your motivation or something like that, right? So
we didn't go into that kind of specific level. We try to keep it as simple as possible for the coders to be as accurate. So if they said you're stupid, even though there was contribution after that, there was still a conflict in there.
I have another question from our the people who watch us online, and so I'm going to read from text. I realize your talk isn't about this, but especially with Andriana here, I couldn't help think about the implication for how we're educating our students. My sense, and I'm culpable in this too, is most criminologists are teaching like it's still 1999. This applies to both content and pedagogical methods. So, what are the base level cyber skills and knowledge we should be teaching undergrads? Any thoughts you have on cyber education or
well, I mean, we teach about drug dealing, about robbery. We teach just background. I think Andriane is teaching our cybercrime class. I'm really jealous because I've never got to teach that class, and then she just walks in and steals it from me. But I think we have a class. It's just we need to get people interested in it, and we need to show them that you don't need to be this elite hacker to hack, but you don't need to be this elite hacker to do research on hacking. And people, I think, are very scared because they say, I'm not going to understand the words, I'm not going to understand what people are saying. But you don't need to be all that technical. I mean, within a 45-hour class that we have, our students are pretty good at doing research on cybercrime, or they have all the basis that they need. The other thing is, to get people engaged. I think, just learning a bit about coding, just to understand what it is, and it's something that's very important. I do it in one of my class, and I mean, just collecting all this data. This one was done manually, but you guys do a lot of online data collection. It gives you such an edge on the job market when you know how to code, because you get access to more data, you get access to data that no one else has, and you're independent. I mean, how many times have we seen people saying, I'm going to do a survey in prison, and then they have to wait 2 years to get the ethical approval. Then the prison says you can come, and then a month before you go, they say, no, you can't. With this, you're completely autonomous. You do whatever you want within certain ethical guidelines, but you're still kind of your own boss. And that's the one thing that I really like, and that's what I pitch my students, is you're not going to be dependent on anyone else to do your research. You'll be just on your own. And I think that's a very powerful message. And that's what we need to tell our students, is you don't want to depend on some other person or some other professor to get data. You can actually do it on your own. And it's not easy. Like, Andréane spends a lot of time just validating the results and doing the marketing and getting people interested into this. But I think it's worth it, even though it's a lot of work. So it's not easier, it's just different work.
I have a question. So we also collect data and we start analyzing the data.
Yeah.
But you just talk about it's very difficult to use the current AI algorithm to extract some insights from the data. We're facing the same issue. We plan to use, for example, knowledge-based construction techniques to make sense out of the data. But we're just at the beginning stage. You have a lot more experience, so we definitely want to have some students who help us coding the data, but probably they cannot handle that large amount of data, right? So we probably will code maybe 1% of data, and then like what should we do in the future, right? Like in terms of analyzing the data. Should we proceed with the knowledge-based construction-based method, or are there any better ways to?
It's always like, what is the best method? Like, what do you need? And AI for certain things is extremely good. Is there a cat or a dog in this picture? AI is amazing. Understanding the meaning of words, it's still very, very difficult. It's still very early on. I use AI to classify all the listings we have. So I had students, once again, they were very happy to do this, I'm sure. But we coded manually 600,000 ads for illicit products, and they coded them for weight and for type. And so we had this 2,200 category of products. And it's just the playbook for all the categories is pretty impressive just by itself. And so this AI is pretty good at classifying stuff. And that's what, to me, AI is going to be good for. But there's no way right now not to go and read the messages and read the content. I don't know of any AI that can do that.
We really need to understand the messages.
Yeah,
So
and
understand what they are talking about. So
there's no shortcuts there,
No shortcuts.
unfortunately. I've tried them, but no.
no work.
But 5, 10, we're always 5 years from having a sentient computer. So, 5 years from now, maybe we'll have it, and then they can do all this stuff for us.
Any other questions? All right, thank you
If
guys.
not, thank you.